Well, hello, Green Team. Welcome to another episode of the Green Team Academy Podcast Live. It's Joan Gregerson here. And on this podcast, we help people get together, make a difference, and feel better. And in a few minutes, we'll be talking with Tony Saladino all about biochar. So that is an exciting area. So he's going to be hopping in here shortly, I think. But in the meantime, I wanted to give you kind of a quick heads up on some of the stuff that we have that is exciting things happening coming soon to you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick here. And so the 2021 International Climate Action Challenge is going to be happening this year. Last year we had it from September 1st to November 30th, so we're on a similar schedule, getting going a couple weeks earlier. August 18th will be our kickoff. And so if you're interested in that, you can find out more at climateactionchallenge.net. And this time, we have this whole 18-week facilitated accelerator that you can be part of. And you can find out more on the website here. If you decide to sign up by March 31st, you're going to get the book, the workbook, this is digital, the action plan checklist, and then during the challenge, you'll get access to the course and the portal and our live weekly trainings and everything that enabled all the folks from our 2020 challenge to make such a big impact. So the pricing is there that you can get 50% off of the regular pricing if you sign up, if you or your team sign up by March 31st. And one of the bonuses that if you sign up by then, we'll also be introducing your team, your initiative during the Earth Week Summit. So that's a pretty cool thing. Just wanted to make sure that I got that info to you. So let me turn that off. And let's see here. We are waiting. I'm just going to check real quick, see if I have a message or anything from Tony. So hopefully he'll be, stop sharing. Okay. So hopefully he'll be joining us with us pretty quick. In the meantime, let me show you a little bit about his project. And I don't know what's going on here, but let me show you a little bit about his project. There's Claudia hopping in. Hi, Claudia. And I hope Tony is joining in a second. Let me show you what is going on here with his project. And I'm also going to read a little bit of his bio because it's pretty amazing. So Tony is a Charmaster Biochar Educator, founder and guide for Eco Tours of Wisconsin. And as his challenge in the 2020 International Climate Change, he met his goal of creating his weight in biochar and turning that into over half a ton of biochar, enough to enrich a dozen 4x10 beds to a depth of 6 inches forever. He also taught a dozen biochar classes so that more people would be able to do the same. In 1987, Tony rode his bike around all 5 Great Lakes, teaching people in person, through TV, radio, and print publications how to live lightly on the planet and experience a higher quality of life at the same time. Over 10 million residents of the Great Lakes Basin heard him speak or read about his trip. So that is what Tony is about, and he has this project that the link is in here. If just cutting to the chase, if you want to know more about biochar, if you support this project at a level of $50, then Tony is offering to do a free one-to-one class with you. And his idea is to have this kind of leave no trace camping where people can come and learn different eco education skills together, and learn how to make biochar, do native tree plantings, and learn all of those, back to nature kind of cultural practices and skills. So let me see here. Oh, yes. Okay, great. So it looks like we've got Tony on here. This is exciting. Tony. Okay, wait. I can't hear you. Let's see.
Does this work?
Yes.
Is this working?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll
It's
just try the
it's a
backup
little
microphone.
it's not very loud, that mic.
Oh.
Let me see. Okay, that seems a little better.
Normally my headset mic is enough.
You might be
Better?
able to change. You might be able to change the settings. There's a little gearbox there that says camera and mic.
Yeah. I tried the audio.
That's sounding pretty good.
You did? Is
Yeah.
it better?
Yeah.
Maybe it's using the headset mic.
Yeah, I think it is. No.
Okay. Maybe you just had to adjust to this.
Yeah, right.
Using a handheld. That'll work for me.
That sounds good. All right. Well, welcome, Tony. I'm so glad this worked out.
And I am too. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is perfect. So yeah, while you're getting all situated, I've just given people just reading your bio and showing the GoFundMe page.
I saw a little about that, and I appreciate you sharing. I appreciate all the work you've done for over a year, getting all this kind of tied together and the links made, the networking. You're
Yeah.
like the fungal hyphae of our whole thing.
That's the best compliment I've ever had.
Well, they do so much. They communicate, they transfer important resources where they need to go.
That's so great. You know what, Tony? 1 year ago today is when I started the program to write the book.
Awesome.
So
that's beautiful. Thank you so much for that effort.
Yeah, so in 1 year, we got the book going, the workbook, and the 2020 International Climate Action Challenge, resulting in all these, thousands of trees and the new gardens and new farms and everything. So I was excited to read about what you had done, because I know you were moving or something in the middle of all that. So
yeah,
that was
the past year I sold 2 houses, moved out of both of them. My mother's house had to be sold and moved out of, so 3 houses technically.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're making room for a new fresh
stuff.
start in 2021.
Absolutely new stuff.
So we're going to talk about two things today. One is biochar. I mean, we're going to talk about everything. Everything's connected, but we're going to talk about biochar, and then we're going to talk about this eco center idea that you have. And yeah, Lisa says that is the best compliment ever. Yeah, she's
I'm sure more people recognize it than just Lisa.
Right, she's a native plant expert with all this stuff.
She knows the full extent then.
Exactly. So
let me just go through a real quick who, what, where, when, why, how.
Yeah,
on biochar.
And Tony, like I had, I got a response to an email that says, "Hey, doesn't biochar involve burning wood? And so isn't that putting carbon into the atmosphere? And aren't there other ways?" And so, yeah, that would be great if you want to take it away. And I'm not sure if you want to screen share or you just want to talk. Either way is really good.
I don't mind screen sharing. I'll probably be just looking at my notes a lot, so not a lot to look at, but yeah, I'm happy to share.
Okay, so either
you mean as far as like a slideshow or something?
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Just
describing
it for now.
Okay, that sounds.
In the links at the end, if you go through the GoFundMe site to the oldest update, that's where you find the slideshow about biochar.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and I think this link is already in the notes. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in the comments though now.
Okay.
And what you were saying was, if anybody wants a link to the slides about it,
Yep.
it's in the first update on the GoFundMe. And
Yep.
I did mention if they want to do a class with you, they want to find out more.
Yep.
If they donate $50 or more to your project, that you can do a one-to-one with them. So
Great.
yeah, so tell us about biochar. It's just like this ancient thing that's getting some attention, and we need a Charmaster to
It is
guide
an
us.
ancient thing. It is an ancient thing. The archaeological research now puts it at over 9,000 years that we've been making this material and teaching other people about making this material. It's an older technology than written language, to put some perspective to it. Basically, what we're doing is creating a network of small tubes in the soil. So it's a permanent structure that's physically made of carbon. I have models that I share around at my classes. It's just a bunch of toilet paper tubes that are joined together. So all these tiny little pores exist at the microscopic level, but the microbes that live on them are the important critters that we're trying to expand the population in the soil. And the water holding capacity of the char is 6 times its weight in water. So we're creating these little tubules filled with nutrients, minerals, basically emulating soil in every way we can, and then adding microbes to that. Once the microbes are thriving, we add it into the soil, and it supercharges the availability of nutrients for plants because the organisms produce exudates that directly feed the plant roots. And the plant roots also exude liquid carbon, which many of these microbes use as food source. So it's kind of facilitating the carbon pathway both in the incoming carbon as well as the carbon that comes out. And it slows the release of water, nutrients, and that reduces your need for irrigation and fertilization. So I've been doing this for about a dozen years. I learned about it first through archaeology. And when I was a child, I committed my entire life to healing the rift between humans and nature. When I turned 21, I rode my bicycle around the Great Lakes to teach people about living better for less, what later became known as sustainability. I was talking about in sheer economic terms, home economics, how to make your garden feed you, how to live in accord with nature rather than at odds with it. And all these things come into play. When I started to learn about biochar, I found that this is a good way to put carbon into the soil. Regarding the email where they questioned, don't you have to burn something to make char? There are ways to make char without a lot of burning of wood. The wood itself releases about half of its energy in the form of flammable gases as you char it. And there are technologies that use that energy to make electricity or run other environmental, other processes, process equipment, heat, process water. So there's a lot of different ways that the energy in the wood can be utilized where you're not just spewing carbon. The other part is half of your original biomass and all the carbon that was in that biomass stays in the ground forever. So if you do release a small amount to the atmosphere in the short run, it's offset by a material that never leaves the soil. We've actually found garden beds enriched over 9,000 years ago that are still more productive today than adjacent soils that did not get the biochar added. The way this works is because it is creating those microscopic tubules, you're adding 14 acres of surface area to the soil with every handful of char has 14 more acres of surface area. And the goal in processing it, the reason I call myself Charmaster, is because I've developed ways of getting the broadest spectrum of organisms to take up residence in the char and thrive before releasing it into the environment. If you put just freshly made char into the soil, it'll actually destroy the integrity of the soil in the short run because it's absorbing all the nutrients, it's absorbing all the moisture, trying to get saturated to the point that microbes can grow on it. I do all that work before I release the char, so it's emulating soil the minute it goes in. Um, this kind of waxes into the reason we're starting the environmental school, and I just want to take a quick stop and ask Joan, are there any other questions that have come in? Do you have questions?
Are you going to talk about how you actually, like if people should actually be making this?
Yep.
I think that's a big thing, is wondering, there's a lot of, because of the processing, there's kind of higher temperatures, and should people be doing it, or should they be buying it, or how do you know? So that, I think that's a big question.
Well, a lot of it depends on scale. And as you get larger, of course, the benefits get larger by making it yourself because you don't have to pay transport costs. You don't have to trust that someone far away is doing it to the standards you would like them to. There's real easy ways to tell if you're getting good char or not, and that's to talk to the producer and ask him if he can send you some that's not enriched in any way. It'll end up feeling a little bit glass-like, and it's real similar to the high-end charcoals that you can buy at your grocery store. Around Wisconsin, we have a lot of charcoal sold at liquor stores. So you can tell this type of charcoal because it looks like a tree got burned. If it's a briquette or in some strange shape that doesn't look like wood, don't bother with that. Get the stuff that you can tell used to be wood. They roasted it. That's the char that we want to start with. And then if you want to make it yourself, you just have to get it hot enough to glow, but not allow air in to contact with it while it's glowing because it'll turn to white ash, and you want to preserve the black ash. So anytime you make a campfire, if you just douse it out with water, you can use a rasp and rasp off the surface where it's black. And that's the exact same thing I'm making on a larger scale. When I do it in a retort, it's to keep it super clean. There's virtually no emissions other than the hydrogen and oxygen, which burn off. And retort process is very clean. You're not putting any noticeable carbon into the atmosphere.
So what is a retort actually?
It's a place where you can heat it up without letting any air into it. So it's an oxygen-free environment that you can heat that material up until it glows and let it cool, and no oxygen ever touches it. So you have 100% black ash and no white ash whatsoever.
And so how are you heating it? What's your fuel for, where does the heat energy come from?
You can use electric furnaces, you can use gas, I mainly use wood because it's readily available.
Okay.
I usually get enough that I junk pick off the side of the road from other people's construction projects or whatever. I almost never buy any wood for fuel. It's just too abundant.
And so the wood that you're burning, so is that releasing some carbon?
Yes, definitely.
And so so you're saying that the trade-off though between the amount of carbon that's released by burning that for that process is offset by
Absolutely. Absolutely. The short term you do release some carbon, but in the long term you've taken carbon and transformed it so that it will never leave the soil. If you have a giant redwood and it blows down in the woods somewhere, eventually it'll rot away and all that carbon goes in the atmosphere anyway. So you can love trees all you want, but that's not the solution, because every tree is eventually going to fall down and the majority of the carbon in it is going to go back into the air. I'm saying that the carbon, once you roast it and turn it into pure carbon, no organism eats it or digests it. If it's eaten by a worm, it comes out unchanged, except it's full of worm castings filling the little pores. And then
Gotcha.
it goes into the earth again, and it loses the carbon that was in the worm castings over time. But the structure, uh, it's like a gaudy cathedral. There's all these vertical striations and tubules,
That's a
uh,
great image. Yeah.
cave upon cave upon cave for these microbes. You can fit 10 bacteria across, like just across one tubule. You can have 10 bacteria lined up across the diameter of the tube.
Hmm.
Like these are intensely small, but bacteria are even smaller. So,
Right. And so
and
the basic equation then is that you invest a little carbon offset in the process,
you sure do.
but
Yeah.
your investment is that you are then sequestering that amount of carbon that went into that tree or whatever it is that you're processing
Mhm.
is then captured and has so there's two things. One, it prevents it from decaying and releasing carbon, but in the other thing that it's doing is restoring soil health and creating this whole uh, lodging condos for good bacteria forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Underground, yeah, eco
That's a
village.
common way that I describe it. It is like condominium complexes. And then when you put the nutrients in, that's like stocking the refrigerators.
Mm.
And then you want to make sure you put minerals in too. Like some people use rock dust or uh, loess, wind blown soil is very high in minerals. I usually add loess, rock dust, and sometimes even like teas or special composts that I make out of plants that I know are very high in specific minerals. I'll put those into the char, and that's like filling the bar fridges. You know,
The mini fridge is,
you've,
yeah.
you've got your main refrigerator for basic sustenance, but then for the party, you need the bar fridge too.
Of course,
So
exactly.
it's just an
Okay,
easy
cool.
way to remember. Once you get all that stuff going, then you have a party for those microbes.
Yeah,
All the different trophic levels, all the creatures who feed on them, creatures who feed on those creatures. And it's like kickstarting the ball game. You know, somebody has to
gotcha,
throw out the first pitch.
gotcha.
So we're making sure everybody, the fans are in the stands, the teams on the field, and then you add the microbes, and everything happens because of them.
Gotcha.
Um,
So, the topic that we came up with when you and I were talking was like, okay, we're covering a lot here, but it's cool because I think people that are in this space understand that there's no, that is the point, is that everything is connected. And so basically your story is, you dedicated your life to educating people and healing this rift. You found biochar is one way to do it, but kind of circling back, your idea of the center is to have this kind of holistic experience. This really, I think, is a transformational experience that people could come to this space and heal personally, but also see all the kind of the potential.
Absolutely. Uh, Biochar is one of those things where it's like any medicine. At a certain rate, it's really good for you. But if you go to pure biochar, you're going to create so many problems over the long run. It's not worth it to try and get it so heavily. Like you wouldn't want even a 50-50 mix in your agricultural land because it's just too much territory. And you'd eventually have to feed the bacteria more than then could keep them healthy because they would outnumber you so much. The general application rate is 1 ton, a metric ton per hectare, which works out to 1 ton for every 2 acres. It seems like a very small amount when you start looking at how much soil weighs and uh, how much water is in soil. Uh, if you only need 1,000 pounds on an acre, a lot of people think, oh, that won't do anything. It's such a small amount, it'll have no effect. But it actually has a huge effect because in a ton, how many handfuls is that? How much surface area and permanent structure was added to the soil just from even 1% change? And I was just reviewing my numbers. 1% change in organic matter in soil can hold 28,000 gallons of water per acre. So a lot of our flood issues, a lot of our erosion issues are uh, largely caused because this water is not infiltrating. It's hitting the ground, taking some soil, and running away with it. So if we can allow the soil to breathe more, be more open, absorb that extra moisture, it changes the whole ecosystem for the better. And that's just one effect of taking a longer look at what we're doing to the earth around us.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and Lisa had this question. I was wondering about that too. You had mentioned, and we probably don't want to go too far into this because I want to make sure we talk about the center. But I was wondering, so where are where did you see when you said you kind of found it from an archaeological standpoint?
the first time I heard about it, the research was on territory that was developed between 3,500 years ago and 3,000 years ago, and that was in the Amazon basin. Um, in the US, uh, Cahokia, the mound culture near St. Louis, and uh, I believe I haven't seen facts of it, but I'm not going to go digging in garden beds that are native cultural sites. It's just not my style. The Menominee Nation here in Wisconsin had notoriety for centuries as being able to grow corn at a farther north latitude than any other tribe. And I'm convinced that they were using char as well in their garden beds. And like I said, I'm not going to prove it with science because I'm not that kind of archaeologist. I'll let other people do that.
Right,
Um,
right.
I honor the cultural aspect of an untouched historical garden bed.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to go digging around.
Yeah.
But people who have dug around at Cahokia found their garden beds had char.
Hmm.
So uh, I can't say anything bad about that.
Yeah.
The older time period, as I said when I first heard about it, they were only back about 3,500 years, and the area is 9,000 years ago. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, if you want to believe that, were enriched with char. And there
Wow.
are other places across Mesopotamia and the Arab world where they have used chars
Hmm.
in the past and even into current modern times. If you go to Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, in the hill country, they're still making char. They're still using char, just like their ancestors did
Hmm.
thousands of years ago.
So it's really global, and it probably is, like you said, one of those technologies that probably just hasn't really been looked for in
We
order to.
we truly have a cultural bias. Uh, Cultures that are quote primitive unquote often have more intact culture than we can imagine.
Yeah. Hey, I
And
have a question, Tony. Do
yes,
you think like when these big wildfires happened in Australia or California and probably elsewhere in the world, I think Germany, um, what is there any is biochar being made in any of that or
ab-
is it?
it absolutely is being made. All you have to do is have an intense enough fire that it burns away all the oxygen. And on a large enough scale, when you have fires miles across, there's absolutely no oxygen that can make it to the middle,
Mm,
only the heat. And if you heat the dry woody material to between 450 and 500 degrees centigrade, about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit at the top, it will glow. Uh, I'm sure you've all looked into a campfire. When it gets to the seething coals, it's just, you can kind of see as the air gets to the gases, it burns it. And otherwise, it's putting light out. That's the
right.
temperature.
Okay.
You douse it out
Yeah,
with
I was.
water, and then you have black char.
You know why I was wondering about that is we've been going up to a cabin in Colorado here,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a fire one year and then floods the next.
Mm-hmm.
And that I noticed that like on the path that there's this black stuff that hasn't changed
Mm-hmm.
in like 10 years since it got washed up. And so that's probably um,
That's char that nature's trying to turn into biochar, but nature has very, very, very slow processes.
mm,
The processing of the char is, in some ways, the most important part. And when I do that, after the microbes go in, I stir and keep the moisture steady for about 6 weeks.
oh, okay.
Stirring, stirring, stirring. Because those tiny little microbes, if they have to grow side by side by side by side by side, it'll take them forever to cover 16 acres in
Mm,
every handful. And I'm making giant buckets of it.
gotcha.
So the stirring action helps move the microbes farther in 5 minutes
Right.
than they could move in 500 years.
Gotcha.
They're too tiny.
Lisa had a good question too of when you're actually applying biochar, let's say that you do no-till agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
but then you're going to apply biochar. How are you actually applying it? And are you like tilling the soil or what's the application process like?
One thing about the biochar, it's very different than char. If you just take the char, like I said before, and it doesn't have the microbes in it, it's not really a preferred food of anything. Uh,
Mhm.
Earthworms might take a little bit of it occasionally, once in a while, but it's not going to be motile in the soil.
Okay.
If it's full of all this life, every other creature is going to want to have a part of that. So some drag it away, some eat it. The earthworm takes a big healthy bite and goes somewhere else, so he's moving it. Um, and you really don't need to till it in and get it evenly spread as much because nature will take care of that once the biome says, hey, this is a resource, we can use it. It's going to
So
move.
it's more a surface application.
You can put it on the surface,
Oh,
although you always want to keep it under mulch.
oh, okay.
Sunlight is the enemy of the soil microbes.
Gotcha.
So I never let my char get direct sun on it from the time I make it to the time it goes in the ground. And the minute it's in the ground, I cover it with mulch.
I see. Okay, so
Um,
you don't
and
necessarily have to be digging down, but you do want to cover it with some kind of
right,
mulch.
right. And
Okay.
then the other important thing about that, I do open the soil with a broad fork from time to time, but that's the most tillage I ever do.
Gotcha.
I would much rather have a high dead root network, a high
Mm,
percentage of dead roots lending to the soil structure than to have opened it
gotcha.
artificially. And if I do take a broad fork and kind of break the soil open, I'll sprinkle char along the gap because there's going to be air and water infiltrating down into those cracks that I made, and the char will be there as well.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
the
Okay,
creatures stay
cool.
alive.
So yeah,
But
so let's talk about the center. Tell a
yes,
bit about that
well,
and how
I just want
what
to say
you're doing.
one
Yeah,
more
go ahead.
brief thing before we leave the subject of the
Yeah.
char. Um, It's just like with I believe it's a Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And it's the same with the char. I'm halfway, a little over halfway through my 20 years of making it. All of it was important, but the next batch that I make is the most important. You have to keep the ball rolling. Once it's going, you have to keep it going. Um, and that kind of gets into the information about the school, the outdoor school. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Firefox. Used to be a magazine, and now it's kind of a living learning center, uh, like a living history museum of Appalachian culture. And you can find them at foxfire.com. But I imagine something similar to that, kind of an all ages summer camp combined with a resort. There will be opportunities for hiking, biking, canoeing, camping, but also this intact permaculture kind of village where things are happening. There are skills being exhibited. People can watch, oh, this is what they're using for natural dye. Oh, what do the edible, we're having a mushroom hunt. What do the edible mushrooms look like? What do uh, what do the livestock do when it's getting to be winter? How do they survive? What if we're demonstrating all the things necessary to have an intact environmental situation that supports diverse and abundant life? People can come in and see the different aspects of that. Well, how do you get your water? Or what do you do with your waste? Or how do you compost when there's wild animals around that want to eat your leftovers? Those kind of questions. We can show them, well, you can take this technology back and do it on 10 square feet on your patio. You can take this technique and actually bring it right into your living room. Uh, Here's something that you can use if you have a half-acre backyard, you know. So by being a living example, a lot of people learn much better in a more hand over hand way where they're integrating it slowly, living it as a process, and seeing the results of their actions. So,
I love this because, I think our like higher education, as you said, like the cultural bias that there's a great vignette in Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass,
hmm,
where she talks about how the elder indigenous women would go and cut I think it was the sweetgrass, at these regular intervals, and it would increase the yield. And there was, like the PhD dissertation group was like, that's ridiculous. That could never work. And it was this kind of white male dominated, paradigm. And her student, her grad student, that was also a woman, kind of pushed through, but they really had to push through all that. At the end of the day, it's like, yeah, the elder women were right. And
yeah,
there was, a couple different ways to do it, and both of them worked better uh, than the current thinking. So I like the idea that higher education is straight from nature, and this is how wisdom has always been passed on,
mhm,
is one person to the next, in as a student of nature, right
yeah,
right there. So this
absolutely.
learning, this living classroom, is very cool.
One of my mentors 20 or 30 years ago used to always talk about how when humans started, the organization of society was the fire pit
Mm,
because you had to cook there. It was the only light after dark. You raised the kids there, you told the stories there, basically stirring the pot of life. And what we've done in modern times is we sequestered those fires away inside our water heaters or inside our furnace, or if we use electric heat or electric water heating, it's coming from a thing far, far away that's pumping the electrons through a wire from that
Right.
fire to make our hot. And we've lost touch with anything that binds the house together. The word house is from hearth. The hearth is what made home. There were no homes before hearth. So why did we sequester it far away where we
Hmm.
can't see it or understand the fire or what happens? And the primitive people, because they lived their life around the fire, they said, hey, do you know the difference between the black and the white ash? That's a thing, because they knew it.
Right.
It wasn't like anybody was telling a story to somebody and making stuff up. This was like a real thing for them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that direct, right, the direct experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
and when you notice those differences, it's hard to go back into your box and deny that it's maybe not as true as you thought it was. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's balanced by another truth that's just as important, because every other creature, its whole job is to be the best creature of that kind that it can be. Whether it's a deer or a snake or a
Mm.
lizard, it has no underlying motivation or cynical belief system that gets in the way of them figuring out what would make them a better deer. They just get out there and do it. So if you're in nature more and you see more of that, wouldn't you make a person that more closely approximated the best person you could be?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to think about it. We do because we can talk and we think we're doing
Right.
great things by thinking about it. But when you finally get down to brass tacks, it's whether you're doing what humans need to do:
Exactly.
feed
Yeah.
each other, care for each other, watch out
Well,
for the environment.
well, and I think, yeah, this is also why I'm so excited about like what, the climate action challenge idea is. It gives people a way to get out of their, worry for one thing, and just, if all you did was you got 10 people together and you planted one tree in 90 days, that would be huge, right? Compared
It's
to
a tree that wasn't there before. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's great.
and that you're in relationship with the tree now, and you're thinking about
Yeah.
the tree, and you're,
Yeah.
you're wondering how's the tree doing, and you're making that kind of, as you said, healing the rift
Yeah.
between humans and nature. So
One of our early planting events with eco tours, we took about a dozen people out and we were planting trees, and we had stopped for our morning break. I think some snacks were going around. We were all rehydrating and just sitting, enjoying where we were. Uh, it was not quite a monoculture, but there wasn't a lot going on in the place we were planting. And one of these little tiny trees, like 7, 8 inches tall, a bird came and landed on it. And we all looked. We were like, how in the world? It's not been in the ground 20 minutes. How did that bird, number one, find that tree? Think it was important to come sit by us for a minute because
right.
it figured out we brought the tree, I think. I mean,
Oh
I'd
my God.
like to think it knew that. And then just before it took off to fly, it dropped a little packet of nutrients right where the roots of the tree had just been planted. And I was like, there you go. The whole
that's
thing in a nutshell.
that's what I was trying to say. This bird just demonstrated it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
And
yeah, so with the center, so it's 80 acres. It's in
yep,
Wisconsin, and
it's completely surrounded by national forest. And there's a big push right now within the National Forest Service to have demonstration projects about sequestering carbon, not only for agriculture, which we'll be able to do some, but also for forestry.
hmm,
And these forests, when they got stripped off, Wisconsin lost its trees once already. So
hmm,
all the nutrient, all the carbon that was in all those trees that built Milwaukee and Chicago, all that is gone and it's not coming back. So we need to actively build soil back that left.
right.
That carbon is gone forever. And I feel a responsibility to at least show someone This is what happens when you switch the paradigm to I'm going to give back, I'm going to give back, I'm going to give back, and I'm going to take a small portion as my reward. And from the great abundance that's built up in doing that, then it becomes a problem of how do I distribute this so that everybody can get the most out of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when you're talking about like deers and, squirrel, I always think like a squirrel, they're like all these other species, they're not powered by anything but just solar and wind and water. And so why did we get the idea that we have to do all this other stuff when we can see in front of us that none of the other species need a lot of the things that we feel that we have to have. And I think what you're talking about, one of the big things I think is a problem with a lot of the environmental movement is that you sign up for something and then they send you a bunch of mailings asking for money. And even if you were able to fund, let's say, the defense for a river or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't personally transform, then you how can we transform our world if we're not transforming? And what
Right.
you're talking about is giving people a transformative experience.
That would actually be my highest goal. Absolutely. Um, in 1987, I rode my bike around all 5 Great Lakes to teach about sustainability. And I talked to over 10 million people using TV, radio, newspapers, magazines. And I actually got coverage from newspapers and magazines I didn't even know about. Like just the ones I know about were 10 million people. And each one of those people may not have transformed from that, but it gave them a little bit more resources so that when it came time to transform, they were more prepared for what was going to happen. Um, Maybe they just learned how to recycle. That's something, you
Yeah,
know. Maybe they just decided to have a fire pit party on Friday night every week with their kids. That'd be a huge thing, and that would transform so many other parts of their life. Just if they made a commitment to say, no, I'm going to sit outside in nature for 3 hours every week.
yeah.
It couldn't be bad, right?
Well, right. It is that reestablishing the relationships. All right. So I mentioned earlier, if you want to know more, dig into the details about biochar, get your questions answered, talk specifically about your situation and understanding, because there are a lot of details. I mean, I'm one that I've watched like 5 different YouTube videos on biochar, and I'm like a little more confused than when I started. And so having somebody that you could say, okay, this is my situation and here's what I'm thinking and what should I do, that's super helpful. And then if you choose to do that, that you also be supporting this project coming to fruition. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's cool. So is there any last thing that we should mention, Tony? Is getting reaching you by the fundraiser or the GoFundMe, or is there another? What other contact info do you want?
Well, I'm available on Facebook, and
Okay.
it is more social than business oriented, and I tend to do more with my email for business. But anybody who contacts me through the GoFundMe page, I'll definitely give them more information. If they want to contact me directly, they can use Facebook, email. Um, I try to be as open and available as possible, but also remember, I need to at least make ends meet at the end of every month, like everybody else. So, if it's worth something, give something back.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I love this idea. Like you said that, the during the pandemic that it's the same with me, like writing a book and not having a book tour.
yes,
It's like, all right, well,
yes,
we'll just do something different. We'll just have an international challenge. But so for in your case, okay, you can't do that other thing, but you can hop on a Zoom call with somebody.
absolutely. Yep, and I
So
do have Zoom availability. If it think there's a 40-minute limit to what my free thing can do, but we can do 2 or 3 sessions if it takes that long. I'm infinitely flexible, and that's primarily because I have resilience, and I've had resilience modeled for me by nature for over 50 years. So
Yeah.
I trust in mimicking nature. It's been around longer than me, and it's going to survive longer than me. So I should take as many lessons as I can from it while I'm here.
Amen.
So that whole thing about resilience, I just want to get the information out. I'm one of those fungal hyphae, just like you, constantly
Yes, you are.
networking, constantly finding better resources, cast off resources, overlooked resources. Um, and then when you put the life into it, if you haven't seen it, there's a video of a room full of mouse traps, and each mouse trap has 2 ping pong balls in it. And then a brave soul throws 1 ping pong ball into the room, and you can kind of imagine what happens.
Yeah.
It's like a breeder reactor of life. And that frenzy and activity in nature helps feed other relationships constantly. There's no end to the relationships that get developed.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like, yeah, be that person that throws the ping pong ball, get in there and
Yep,
and do something,
absolutely.
make something happen.
I
All right.
I
Okay.
just want to say one tiny little thing at the
Yeah,
very
sure.
end. I'm sorry, but I heard just the other day that in primitive cultures, sometimes they spend uh, as little as 1 calorie of energy to harvest 5 calories of food. And if you're sitting up in a giant cab of a huge harvester driving down the road harvesting corn, you're spending up to 200 calories expended for every calorie that you bring home.
Wow.
So we're subsidizing the heck out of this fossil energy nightmare. And all we need to do as people is step back, think twice, and do the best we can with what we have. So that's what I would encourage everyone to do. The
Yeah.
best you can with what you have.
I mean, I think like seeds, like if we can't be amazed at a seed that then can grow into like a tree and produce thousands of fruits with each, hundreds of seeds, and it's like
Yep.
it's showing us our return on invest. Nature's way of doing it is just beyond our human economics, and to keep remembering that.
Yep. I'm not a big fan of sharing Bible stories, but I think there's one about a mustard seed. Uh, the tiniest thing you can imagine, the poppy seed or the mustard seed, it creates this huge thing. Like I look at peas and beans, I'm like, this is going to be 6 feet tall in a couple of months. It took me 20 years to get to be. I'm not even 6 feet tall yet. It's over 20 years I've been waiting.
You just wait a few more. You'll get
Yeah.
there. Don't wait. Eat more peas and
I
beans.
think I'm on the sliding down side of height.
Yeah, but right, that's the thing that right, there's these miracles all around us, and if the more we're in contact and can be reminded, yeah, this is abundance and prosperity, in direct relationship with nature. So
Absolutely. Search for
awesome.
my name at GoFundMe and uh, let me know what you're doing.
Sounds
I'd
great.
love to know.
Awesome. All
Talk to you
right.
soon.
Okay. Well, terrific. And thanks everybody for popping in, Lisa and Wanda and Claudia. And yeah, and thanks so much, Tony, for all that you're doing. I'm glad we got a chance to do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, look for Tony C. Saladino for the GoFundMe. And remember, everybody, the time for action is now because there is no planet B. See you soon. Okay. Bye.